Senator John Husted with us this morning, our cover story. He has been, as we were mentioning a little bit earlier, among the loudest voices of support for the president's huge tax and spending package, extolling its benefits as part of the campaign, the early campaign in next year's special election to retain his seat. And I want to ask you about OB3, as it's been nicknamed, here in just a bit. But before we get to that, last week we spoke with Bob Latta about his work in getting the Halt Fentanyl Act passed, and you were one of the key players that helped move that bill through the Senate. So I will ask you as well, how satisfying was it to see that measure signed into law by the president?
It was very satisfying. The reason is because I've seen the horror that fentanyl does to our communities, to our families, to people. And it's just tragic to see how it's just devastated so many people in our state. And so everything that we can do, including the Halt Fentanyl Act, which will give law enforcement more tools to help crack down on the drug traffickers, is a big deal. You know, shutting down the southern border is going to help a lot because you not only you've stemmed the flow of fentanyl, but you also stem the flow of the drug dealers who come with it. All of those things are good, but fentanyl is the most dangerous drug that I can ever recall, and I'm glad we made progress. But this is a fight that's never over. This is just one positive step in the battle.
Yeah, you mentioned border security as a key component to controlling the flow of fentanyl, and that actually will segue nicely into the biggest measure, obviously, of this term, and that is the one that you've been talking about on the early campaign trail for next year's special election, the One Big Beautiful Bill. You've been shouting this from the rooftops. It's been part of the television ads that you've been running. You've been making the rounds on the talk show circuit. Really, like we said, shouting this from the rooftops for anyone who will listen. Some conservatives, though, have expressed concerns about the cost of this bill. Are you confident that the policies in the bill will lead to enough economic growth to offset the CBO's projections of the cost?
Well, if you look at the new CBO projections, they say it actually reduces the deficit by $366 billion. So once the final bill was done and scored, it shows that it cuts the deficit. Now, it doesn't cut the deficit enough. We still have a long way to go with that. But as we often recognize, you cut as much as you can until you run out of votes. And I was certainly willing to find more savings, to be smarter about how we spend money. But we made progress. But the important thing is working people, Ohio businesses would have seen a $4 trillion tax increase if we didn't do this. So we talk about when you do it, but what if we hadn't done it? If we hadn't done it, we'd have seen taxes go up on the average Ohioan dramatically, the average small business dramatically. Instead, it's a pro-growth, pro-working family bill because it eliminates taxes on overtime, eliminates taxes on tips, provides a $2,200 tax credit, so a family of four will get $4,400 more a year to care for their family. All of those things. This is the best middle-class targeted bill that's been passed in this century, and I'm proud of that because that's Ohio people. This is what Ohio's about. We go to work, we have working families, and this targets helping those working families.
You again touched on the main concern. Obviously, when we talk about this bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we're familiar with the arguments that Democrats have been making in opposition, and I don't want to rehash all of that. But I am interested, again, in the opposition from the conservative side of the aisle, and you kind of touched on it. One of the concerns was that there wasn't enough cutting being done to federal spending. What's the next effort, or where do you want to see additional cuts? Because again, the counter argument was we're going to be making more. So where at?
if you recall, then we followed up a week later with the president's rescissions bill, in which we cut a bunch of foreign aid for things like Sesame Street in Iraq and transgender surgeries in Guatemala, the stuff that DOJ had identified, and did something that Republicans have been trying to do since the Reagan administration, eliminating funding for National Public Radio. Your radio station doesn't get subsidized. We shouldn't have one radio station in this country subsidized by the federal government when we have a $37 trillion national debt. So all of those things are have been accomplished, and more needs to be accomplished. You can count on me to be one of the votes to find more savings. It's just you run out of votes because not any Democrat will vote for any savings, and we only have 53 Republicans, and if you just lose a couple of them, you can't go any deeper.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with this. Where next? I mean, what would be the next target in your mind?
Look, I think you have to continue to go through the federal government, as we've talked about, but in the end, it is a difficult proposition to get people in Washington to spend less. And look, this is what we did in the bill, though. I honestly, this is the stuff we stopped states who were gaming the Medicaid system to pay for health care for illegal immigrants. Literally, that was happening in New York, in California. We now have a work requirement so that if you're able-bodied, healthy adult who's been receiving free health care paid for by your listeners, you now have to work at least 20 hours in return for those benefits. It is changing the culture. Just think of the difference between we have people who were taking from the system and not giving, who now are going to have to give in return for their benefits. You start to generate more revenue for them in terms of an income and a job and a path forward in life, and you stop taking so much from your fellow taxpayers. That's the kind of stuff that has to happen. It has to be a shift on every level of programming to stop taking so much and start earning and giving back to the country just by going to work and living and prospering. That's the stuff, that's the culture we're trying to change.
Now, the next big thing that I want to touch on here in the time that we have, you have introduced a bill to combat human trafficking by training Labor Department employees on identifying signs of trafficking and getting them to more aggressively report those to the appropriate law enforcement individual. This sounds like a no-brainer in this bill. This should be a slam dunk, one would think.
Well, I think it's going to be. We have strong bipartisan support for the bill that I'm leading to stop the human trafficking. It's one of the most sickening things that you see when you see children. You talk to Tom Homan, the Borders Czar. He talk about 300,000 children that came across the border over the last 4 years. No one knows where they are. You see it with children who grow up in our communities who somehow their parents get connected to drugs and they start trafficking their kids. It is. I've done ride-alongs with law enforcement and children's services workers. It's gut-wrenching to see what children and some people are put through. This is going to help train people at the Department of Labor who are on those work sites. They're at construction sites, manufacturing sites, food processing sites, agriculture. Teach them to identify the signs of human trafficking, report it to law enforcement, and let's clean it up. And we got everybody in government and outside of government that sees signs of this needs to tell law enforcement, because when I talk to the FBI about it, they'll tell you a good lead is incredibly helpful. They need to know where signs are happening so that they can go investigate.
We will follow the progress of that measure. Again, Senator John Husted with us this morning. Thanks very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.